Hi, my name is Sridhar Rangayan. I'm the Festival Director of KASHISH Mumbai International Queer Film Festival, which is having its 12th edition right now. And with the second week of the festival, which has started in August 19th, and we are in the second week of the festival. And today we are here to speak to the wonderful filmmakers of the Student Short Competition #2, which you already must have seen just now. And thank you for joining the conversation. Thank you, Gloria Stern, the filmmaker of Julka and Julie. And thank you, Xanthe Dobble, the filmmaker of Elagabalus from Australia. And thank you, Samira Saraya, the director of Polygraph, joining from Israel. So 3 different countries, diverse cultures and diverse films. And thank you for making these beautiful films. Over to you, BHAGI. BHAGI basically is a very well-known curator and a programmer. And she basically also is part of the preview team of KASHISH. And she's been coordinating the Q&As for the festival. So thank you for BHAGI for hosting this Q&A, and over to you.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be speaking to all of you. I enjoyed watching all of the films. I watched them a couple of times over. So I thought maybe we can have a bit of a round to go about what made you all take these particular stories and what inspired these films to be made, and then we can go with the questions after. So we start a bit basic. Gloria, would you like to go first?
Yeah, my film Julka and Julie is about 2 women who fell in love with each other in their youth in 1960 in Germany. And they were not allowed to love each other, and so but it's basically a story about patriarchal and heteronormative structures, and also about being a woman in this world. So
how did you find the story? Like, how did this story come to you, or what made you pick this particular story to tell?
I wanted to do a kind of a Romeo and Juliet story at countryside. Instead of Romeo, I took 2 Juliets. What was very important for me, on the one hand, because there are too few main lesbian characters in TV and series anyway, especially in the mainstream. And on the other hand, female characters, all the female characters are very limited to cliches. So I wanted to do a story like I said, Romeo and Juliet, but instead of they die, they meet again in old age. And I was interested in what will brought this up. So I wanted to do a mixture between the young women who find their love, who are very light and naive with it, and the old women who meet again, and the stories of their lives are in their background, and how will they what will it be in the end? So. Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at generation and how that has changed with media and media. What about you, Samira? What was the inspiration for the seed of that story? Polygraph was something else.
Yeah, well, the story chose me. I didn't choose the story. No, well, it's my personal story. It's based on in a real story. My relationship with an Israeli girl. You said that I'm from Israel. I'm calling from Israel. Yes, I'm calling from Israel, Palestine. My name is Samira, and I'm Palestinian. I'm Israeli Palestinian. It's because many people do not know this definition and etc. And the story talks about a relationship between 2 women, one Palestinian Israeli, one Jewish Israeli. And the Jewish Israeli, she is a soldier in the army, in the intelligence, and she is part of the and the time is 2014, and there's a very aggressive attack, Israeli attack on Gaza, and the soldier, the officer, the intelligence officer, she is actually practicing this violence, and the story is so big that no short film can hold it. So this is why, for me, this film is just a window on the 24 hours of it. We go in the middle of the relationship where we don't know how it started and how it's going to continue, but it's a 24 hours where in top of all of these things, you know, being a Palestinian and Israeli in a relationship, in a gay relationship, lesbian relationship. And when she's a nurse and one, she's a soldier. And the war, and all on top of all of these things, the Israeli soldier is asked to come to interrogation and a polygraph test. So this is actually the film, the background, and I wrote the film, I played the main role, and I directed. And I'll tell you why when we talk about the process.
Yes, absolutely. Xanthe, we would love to hear about the origin story for Elagabalus. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
It is Elagabalus. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Widjabul Waiable people of the of the Bundjalung Nation, which is the land that I'm on in Australia at the moment, and also the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, which is the traditional land that the film Elagabalus was made on in Sydney, Australia. This is a thing that we do in Australia.
No, you can also tell us why you do it, because it's the whole point of all of this is to get to know how where our stories come from, where we come from, and how we connect. Absolutely, please.
Sure. Well, Australia is a colonialist nation, and it's not a very old nation of white settlers, but of course we have one of the oldest Indigenous populations in the world, made up of many diverse nations and language groups. So I am currently on the traditional lands of the Widjabul Waiable people of the Bundjalung Nation, which is sort of in northern New South Wales, sort of regional Australia. But anyway, Elagabalus is a film about a non-binary genderqueer Roman emperor, which is very loosely based on real history. I've very liberally adapted the seeds of history. The actual film was inspired by a painting. I come from a visual arts background predominantly. I've been a digital and installation artist before going to film school and deciding to have my hand at linear story making, though I'm sure if you've just watched Elagabalus, you will question whether or not I've achieved any kind of linear story making. There's this amazing painting called The Roses of Heliogabalus by Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema, which features in the film. It's in the opening shots, and also the final scene of the film is a reenactment of that painting. But the story goes that there was this hedonistic emperor called Elagabalus, or Heliogabalus, the god of the sun, or so they named themselves. They didn't rule for very long in Rome because they weren't a very good leader, but they really, really knew how to have a good party. And they had a lot of incredible dinner parties that were all color themed. And there was allegedly, this is like a real historical thing, there was allegedly this one dinner party that they threw where they had this false ceiling inside the hall where they were having this huge sex-fueled feast. And halfway through they pulled a lever and the ceiling opened up, and like millions and millions of petals fell from the ceiling, and there were so many petals that half of their guests suffocated to death.
On petals?
Yes, on petals. And it's this incredible painting that was made in the 1800s, and it was written about in the Historia Augusta, which is where most of the story points from Elagabalus are drawn from.
What drew you to this story? the painting did, but what made you go like, I want to tell the story differently in my own,
Yeah, sure. Well, it started with the painting. I saw the painting on a friend's bedroom door at a very grungy queer party in Melbourne a couple of years ago. And I was just obsessed with the colors in the painting, these beautiful pinks and whites and this decadent compositional feast. And so I started looking into it and I started reading about Elagabalus, and the more I read about it, the more I realized that it was sort of this hidden queer narrative. So Elagabalus is written about with he, him pronouns, like all Roman emperors are, but there's this incredible, very clear trans narrative beyond the text where Elagabalus, despite their many downfalls as a leader, had this life as a trans woman or a non-binary person, probably as they would be identified today. And so I wanted to pull out these elements of this story the more and more that I learned about it. They did have this love affair with this charioteer, Heracles, that features in the film. They did have this very strange relationship with their mother. They would go out and scout the baths to find new men to hook up with. Or make into their husband, and they would dress as a woman a lot of the time. And so I suppose being a non-binary person and not seeing very much representation of that on the screen, though that is changing, obviously. Queerness is a very hot topic according to Netflix these days. So perhaps we will see more of that. But I wanted to kind of recreate this historical narrative, but take away all of the rules by setting it in the future inside this highly constructed sort of drag ball situation.
Right. In fact, what I'm most fascinated about our mix currently of stories is something you take history and put it in a futuristic space. Gloria, you sort of seen how the present would look like for people who had who were trying to be themselves in the past with the kind of context that was there. And Samira, you're looking at the absolute present within 24 hours in an ever-changing context. And I love how the three of you have used the notion of time so differently. And I wanted to ask, since Xanthe has spoken about history and using that as a futuristic way of telling the story, Gloria, what about you? How did you navigate this notion of how two lesbian women in what 30, 40 years back? The context was completely different, right? It was bad words at that point, and how they would interact now when the narrative has changed and it's cool on Netflix. How did you work with the notion of time?
What was the last sentence? I didn't understand.
How did you work with the notion of time? So how did you, like, what was the process actually when you were looking at the present through the eyes of the past and what it might have been there? Did you have to do some research? Did you talk to people? How did you arrive at those lovely characters? By the way, I love the two women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, I did the research. For me, it was also very important because the film was basically made because there was an invitation of tender from a broadcast TV, Dreisatz, and yeah, with our film university. And for them, it's important that you take a literary text and put it in something new and something, yeah, current, something different. So I needed a text for my Romeo and Juliet story. And that was the love letters from Radcliffe Hall to her lover, Evgenia, which she wrote in the late 1930s.
These are real love stories. I mean,
yeah,
these are real love letters. And how did you come across them?
It was just easy because if you search for lesbian literary, there are just a few, and yeah. So, but I really loved that letters because it's so much belonging, so much longing, and so much pain also in these letters that inspired me a lot, and also just feeling of this old language, and yeah, I just smelled that that letter. So yeah, but I also did a big research, and also where did people met in the 1960s, because yeah, I don't know. So where was the point of meeting for women in that time? And yeah, so and for me it was important that this main character Julka has really a deep connection with the other person, with Julie over the years. So that was this point also with the voiceovers I put in, which are inspired from the text from Radcliffe. So I just incorporated the texts of Radcliffe in those pieces, and that, yeah. So that there is like a deep connection over the years to this young women she loved, and she loved over the years. Although she was married, she married after, and she got 2 kids, and she lived not the life which she wanted to live, but she had always this little treasure of this love in her heart, in her mind. And yeah, that was important for me to show this, or to make it yeah, feelable.
Did you end up meeting or speaking to people who maybe came from that generation or had these particular struggles, and were able to give you some idea of where people might have met or what they did?
Yeah, of course. And I also have a grandmother which is very near to the figure of the mother in the story. So I also grew up with that feeling of strong patriarchal structures where you have to fit in, and if you don't fit in, then you are not part of the society. And the big fear which was in those time in the people, I think there is also something today. So it's not that we are so open, especially in Germany. We sometimes think we are so open as a society, and then it turns out that a lot of lesbian women do not dare to show in public because they are afraid to
be out in public. Yeah.
To get hate. And for me, I don't understand why it's also in these times, but yeah, it is like it is. And I wanted to show also that the older Julka is also not free. Just the times has changed, but there are so many from these barriers still in these times. So she also has to, had to struggle, and has to free herself. So yeah. Oh, sorry, my English is so bad.
No, not at all. Thank you for this. You made your point really clear. In fact, I wanted to take off from that when you were talking about structures of society as well, and how they were trying to move that, and actually then come to Samira, where the story is so much in flux, right? You've got multiple identities at the same point in time, and I love the fact that the film takes place in a closed space, right? It's the room, it's her house, and then it's the car, and when the windows are down, you can sort of see the outside world, but you know that it's a very, like, that negotiation does not come through like actively, but you know there's a lot of negotiation. So we'd love to hear about how that balance was there. What was the process? And since it's a personal story, I'm sure there's a lot more there.
Yes, the film deals with with a relationship between two women, but also between two words and between spaces and places. Because as you said, yes, I wanted to kind of create two spheres, two places. That one is the house where we start from a very harmonic, a beautiful moment when they are having sex, and suddenly the outside space by the siren, it enters, and from that moment, all this the relationship, and exactly, yes, the negotiation between the spaces, between figures in the space itself. And there's some things that it's hard for someone who do not read Hebrew or speak Hebrew to see things, but yes, all the characters and the outside that she meets by only going through the street, not even meet by, give the look. This is why you don't see a point of view, kind of the main character. Only we see the outside when she's in her car, but it's the view around. It's not like exactly a point of view, because this situation where this sphere, for Palestinian women to go in the streets, it's a different experience for a Jewish woman. Like when I go here, like I run on the beach, and I go through a museum. It called Museum for Freeing Jaffa, while it's the only remain house from a Palestinian neighborhood that was ruined in 48. So for me to run next to this house, it's a different experience for that Jewish women go through this place. That it's a historical place. It's a museum for freeing Jaffa, while for me it's the only remaining house from occupying Jaffa. You understand? This is the negotiation, how I negotiate myself in a way that I can breathe in such a sphere, just to live. Like there is the scene when the soldier goes out from the car, and the Yasmin, the Palestinian characters, drive through the city, and some of the people said, wow, it's just a fantastic art that you did. How you managed to bring so many flags in the streets and cars and the police cars, and where this guy that you saw in the film, the guy that he's just a normal guy in the street where we standing with the car next to it, and he listened and hears Arabic, and it wasn't. We shoot it in 2019, where everything's okay, not in the middle of a war, where like when it's a middle of war, take the things that you saw and you just multiply it with 100 times. Okay, so this I wanted to deal also with this situation, that it's kind of transparent for people. Like, no, we don't live in the same country, we don't walk the same streets. We don't see, sorry, my dog. We don't see the same visuals. You know, we are dealing with. Shut the fuck up, yeah, Lulu. Sorry, it's recorded.
It can be edited. It's all right. Don't worry about it.
Oops. We're queer. We know how to. Well, anyway, so it's yeah, it's really interesting, because the experience of being Palestinian, just walking the street with no war situation, with no situation at all, just only by marching the street, walking the street, yes, I need to be in a negotiation situation all the time. How much I take in, how much I hold out, which part of me can be relaxed and exist, and which parts is need to be shut and cut in from the situation in order to be able to live. And yes, in order to be able, the Palestinian character, in order to be able to live this situation, to love this girl, she needed to disconnect herself from a very major parts. So one of the things that I think that for me making the film, it was to deal with myself, my emotional things that I went through in this relationship.
And how was that using, because you're using the technique of film in order to tell your story, sort of like work with that. What was that process like? Was it helpful? There was a
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
What was that process like? Was there like did it help you? Was it cathartic in some way? Did you have to figure out how the technology can convert your sentiments?
I knew that I wanted to bring a story that some people who see it without knowing that this is my personal story will have the documentary feeling. If you had, because this is why I didn't do many of the shots. It's a one shot, especially the main no cutting, tack, very close-ups and etc. Things like that it's very cinematic. I wanted to make just to bring life, and life it's like this. It's not cut and we go over the shoulder point of view. All these things, I felt that it's going to be not right for my story, and I wanted to bring this documentary feeling, knowing that the main thing that I want to bring, to make it visible and existent, it's dynamics and intimacy between characters, whether the sister and the friend, and the intimacy. And I know that this is a hard thing to create on screen. This is why it was shot in my house. The location is my house that I sit now and do the Q&A from it. I auditioned my own sister, but she didn't get the role. But the character, the clothing, it's my real sister clothing. And she is a friend of mine that I know her, this actress. The rehearsals with the main character, the Jewish character, it was dating. We went out, we did a very honor and humble, whatever, but we went out, we went to, she claimed to be heterosexual, but whatever. I'm just kidding. I love her very much, and she's a heterosexual woman. So in order for us to create this intimacy, we went to lesbian bars, to parties. She came over and we had dinner together. I cooked dinner for her, and we wanted to know each other, what she likes, where she come from. I know her family and etc. I wanted to create this situation. But from the other hand, I wanted also to explore this character, Yasmin's character, to explore it, and I wanted to put it in another body, another Palestinian actors. But unfortunately, I couldn't find a woman that she is willing to play lesbian on screen, and especially having sex on screen, where we still live in a society, in an Arab society, that it's conservative society. First of all, women that they are sexually active, that they are not married. It's a shame. It's something that doesn't, well, it happens, but they don't talk about it. And of course, to be a lesbian and to be occupied in a sexual act. So I couldn't find, it took me 2 years, and eventually I play it. but now I understand that it was the right thing for this film to be done in this way. So I tried from one hand to make it a little bit far from me in order to explore new things that a new body, new flesh, and can bring to this character. But from other hand, I knew that I want to stay as close as to the documentary feeling.
This actually brings me straight off to Xanthe, because both these films to me have such different cinematic styles and approaches. Could you tell us how? I know you're a mixed media artist, and you've mentioned that. How did you find the language of the film, or what made you pick it? Because it's so lovely and larger than life, and then yeah, it's a whole other setting altogether.
Yeah, it sounds like I have sort of made the polar opposite type of film to what Samira has made, but that film sounds incredibly important, and I can't wait to watch both of your films at some point. But I have very much leaned in to the cutting process of film. I would probably consider myself an editor before I would consider myself a director, although I did direct this film, obviously. And in fact, I credit myself as the editor before the director in the closing credits of the film. And I think that speaks very much to the way that the storytelling plays out in Elagabalus, which was very much shot to be pulled apart and reconstructed in the editing process. So I think that I was sort of trying to enact my own notions of queer theory in the process of making a visual language. So I was reading a lot about queer temporality at the time, and sort of these ideas of queer people living beyond the bounds of heteronormative patriarchal structures of linear experience, where we, you know, we're born and then we have to get married and then we get a house and then we die. And queer people sort of live beyond the bounds of those structures and can choose to engage in them, choose or are forced to, depending where you are in the world, choose to engage in them in a different kind of way that could be in any order or could not be part of that system at all. And I suppose that gives us this beautiful sort of space of becoming, where we're constantly sort of transforming and shifting into new ways of being and new styles. And I wanted that to sort of be reflected in the way that Elagabalus was put together, which has a lot of different things going on. It's hyper-referential. It's got the painting that I mentioned earlier, but it's also sort of drenched in internet culture and in other visual art references.
So, yeah.
It's got a musical number in the middle. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It has text on the screen. It's very Brechtian at points. It's really trashy. It's sort of like this high art trash ball of a film. And it's sleazy and silly and fun. And I really wanted it to constantly be changing. And I don't think that I would be spoiling anything to say that the lead character dies in the end, because we say it in the opening line. It's a prophecy from the beginning, but I suppose I wanted, for by the time that you got to that moment of death, for it to be able to be this celebration beyond the reality of that situation. And the character of Elagabalus, historically, leading back to what I was saying before, reading about this actual person, this actual historical figure was killed very brutally. Not for their sexuality, because they were a very bad leader, it turned out. But I'm sure that their sexuality didn't help. Though, I mean, ancient Rome, we had such a different understanding of genders and of sexualities in ancient cultures, and we kind of stepped backwards substantially with Freud and co. Anyway, the character was killed in this brutal way, and I think that in making this film, we wanted to give Elagabalus the death that they desired, as this sort of egomaniac, hedonistic, wonderful freak, and we wanted them to die in this spectacular way that was on their terms.
Yeah, no, because even right now, we just mentioned about ancient Rome and how things were different. I feel, and both Gloria and Samira have spoken about how the present and it is still difficult. I mean, it's going to be difficult for a while, even though we actually all come from histories where things were very different than how they are right now. So this is actually a twofold question. How did your universities respond to your stories? Do they have a problem with it? Did they, like, what was their general approach? And even within the school itself, like how much liberty does exist to pick the stories you want to tell? And that's one when it comes to the academic side of things. And the second is actually from the social world that everyone else, like each one of you inhabits at the moment. How do people respond? How do you think people are going to respond? Have many people watched the film and spoken to you about it? Yeah, we'd love to hear that. Gloria, do you want to go first? Okay, Samira put her hand up. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, it's different for me because I separated the process for the tell the production and then after the production. And tell the production, the challenges was a few things. Like in the university, you asked about the university, there's the producer of the university that need to approve that, okay, this film, Tel Aviv University is going to support it. So he read the script and he come and tell me, Samira, it's a kind of a pity because you are like shooting in a, listen to the terminology, you are shooting in a very big rifle in a small bubble. It's like a Palestinian and a Jewish. She is in the army, not only in the army, she is in the intelligence, and it's a war. It's kind of how you say that it's not trustful, irreliable. Yeah, he said, well, it's irreliable. So I told him, so first of all, welcome to my irreliable life. So, and I promise you that the irreliable scenes, I left it outside. So it was, I had this difficulty in the beginning, for people to see that it's a story, a legitimate one. And another thing, we are talking about, I don't remember if you mentioned it before, but we talk about images. Yes, Gloria said about, the images of a lesbian woman in screen, and we don't see it, and etc. And all these things. And it's the same for the Palestinians, the characters of Palestinian LGBT in the Israeli cinema. Usually they are, the one that they are running away from their society, and they are inside the closet, and the white how you say that, the one on the horse, what's the name?
White Knight.
Yeah, the white knight comes as the Jewish white knight come to save the Palestinian from himself and from the violence of the society. And it's always, there's a victim and the savior. And I found, people that they are know only these images, they find difficulty, go with the film. And so I find kind of a challenge there. And after that, when the film comes out, I knew that people going to love it and people going to hate it. And it depends who is the people, because people that they do not acknowledge at all existence of something else, of someone else, of different ideologies or different relationship, they will find hard to accept the relationship or the story from the starting point, I found it difficulty. There is some Palestinian actors that didn't even want to come to audition for a relationship between Palestinian and Israeli soldier. The starting point of the story, it was hard for many people. And also from the Jewish side, it's hard for them. For them, it's a kind of a betrayal, you know, to go out when you are in the intelligent, going out with the Palestinian, she is considered to be your enemy. How can you do that? So the starting point of the characters was challenging, and the people that they're from in their own personal lives do not tolerate such thing that disturb the system, their thinking and their beliefs. They will find difficulty to like this film. But many, no one see it can stay indifferent for it, whether will love it or not love it. And I'm as a creator, I always do things with this acknowledge that some people gonna love it and they're gonna really be moved and touched by it, and there's some going to hate it, and this is another way to be touched and moved by the film.
That's a nice way of looking at it. Thank you, though. Gloria, what about you? Was there resistance from the university after people watched your film? What was the kind of response you had? Because you also mentioned your grandmom has a similar role to the mother in the film, so that must have been a bit of a struggle. Was that clear? Should I speak clearer?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm just thinking because for me, I think I don't have to tell a lot about what was the reactions afterwards, because I have the feeling that because of COVID, there were so less discussion or possibilities to discuss it, and I have the feeling I'm living very in a bubble where the people were happy about films with more diversity, and so the reactions were very positive. But what before I made the film, the biggest point for people when I told about what I'm trying to do was that a lot of people said, old women, who wants to see that? So that was more a point of negative reactions, and old women who kiss each other, who wants to see that. So, and I said, of course, I want to see that, because I don't see that. At that point, there were no feature film I could tell with older women who love each other. So in the last 2 years, they came something across, but at that point, there were nothing. And I think there is such a big, such a big hole. There is something missing. We see women until 40, and then it's over. It's like, okay, they are mothers, they are grandmothers. I don't care about what they're doing afterwards, the rest of their, I don't know, 50 years of life. So that is really something that, I had to struggle with. And I think what was also something what a lot of people said, the film is too beautiful to me. So also in the film university, somebody, in the festival team said it's too beautiful. Nobody wants to see this film. Make it, you should make it harder, and you just quit your happy end. And I think for me, it's a political statement to give this happy end. Sorry for the spoiler, but it's not a happy end. Like everything is fine, and they live together until the rest of their life. So it's still a a tough time, and there is a lot to do for my figures, but there is the hope that everything will be fine in the end. And for me, it was so important to give that, and that is something. In so many lesbian characters dies in the end of a film or of a series. So that's a tradition to die in the end for lesbian characters, and I was really like, what the fuck? I want to give that happy end, and I want that they love each other and that they have hope, and that why not? They lesbian characters also has the right for a happy end.
Yeah, everyone doesn't have to die. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was more what I had to deal with it. Yeah.
Yes, and the university was, I think, they'd anyway asked for an adaptation of sorts. So there wasn't any problem as such, or questions or with the story. Nice. What about you, Xanthe?
Well, it took a little while to convince AFTRS, where I was at the time, the Australian Film, Television, Radio School, that making this film was a good idea. But once they were on board, they were very on board. So my pushback from the university wasn't so much about there being lots of queer content. It was more about the fact that I was coming from a department outside of directing and was coming at it as an artist and as an editor. But I just really bolstered myself by being super, super collaborative. So Elagabalus is by no means just my film. A lot of other people worked on this film. I had a script writer, Sam Harriman, and he was amazing. And I had an amazing producer, Alexis, and I had an incredible composer, Geordie Hayes. And all of these different moving parts really made it appealing to the university, because I inscripted about 25 other students to work on the film with me.
How was that as a process? That's a large thing.
Luckily, I had an amazing producer that did a lot of that admin for me. I just had to go and be a charismatic front man and hope that people would join me along the way. But almost 80 people worked on Elagabalus in the end. And I really reject this idea of the auteur within filmmaking, because it's a misnomer. It's not possible. There's so many different voices in the room. The actors influence it. The way that the camera is focused makes a huge change. So yeah. AFTRS was very happy with me, because we have specific criteria for complex collaboration. So they got to tick off some boxes for that. And they also got some inclusive looking marketing images for the foreseeable future, having that many queer people on one set at the same time. So I think that we ticked some boxes for their diversity department in that way. And as has already been said, it's so difficult to gauge what people have really been thinking about our films at this time, because like both of you, I assume this was shot in 2019, in the before time, before we were in this global pandemic, and the film's done relatively well by all accounts. Like it's gone to lots of little festivals and it's won a couple of prizes and it looks beautiful.
Yeah,
but
yeah, it does.
We can't go anywhere. We don't have that experience, and so much about making these films is about the community and is about that sense of broader collaboration and being able to meet people and talk to them about your ideas and get excited and want to make shit together. And that has been taken from us at this time, which is just a real bummer, because I would love to sit around with a bunch of other queer people and talk about how much we love movies.
Yes, it's why the festival is also, why the festival exists. It's why, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So, yeah, we haven't gotten to do any of that in the flesh, but maybe it will have another life. I would really see Elagabalus. I'd love to pull it apart again, and I'm talking with the writer and the composer at the moment about turning it into a stage play, into a musical, like a full length thing. So maybe it'll have a second life. And I've also still got all of the original footage, and I'd love to make it into like a multi-screen spatial installation. So it will live in many other ways beyond this historical moment of pandemic.
On that note, thank you, you guys. This has been such a nice conversation. I love hearing more about. I really enjoyed all of your films, and hearing more about the process and what went into it and the thinking behind it has been super fascinating. I'm pretty certain our audience is going to feel similarly and have a bunch of questions. So I'm going to ask Sridhar to come back on and wrap the Q&A for the future as we are.
Thank you so much, Pagi. This is one of the most wonderful conversations I've ever heard. We've been doing a lot of Q&As, but this has been one of the best. We talked about history, we talked about realities, we talked about different kinds of cinema making. Samira's film is more like documentary, whereas Xanthe's film is more like set up and beautifully shot and edited. So thank you for joining this particular conversation, and thank you, Gloria, for joining in. Though your child is not well, I really appreciate you taking time off, putting your child in care, and joining this session. I really appreciate that happening. And so thanks to each of you for joining in. So so all of you are watching this particular Q&A. If you have any questions for Gloria, Xanthe, or Samira, please put it in the comment box and I'll make sure they see this and respond to you in the comment box itself. And there's still one more week of the film festival still remaining. So if you have not got your passes yet, please go to mumbaiqfs.com and buy a last weekend pass, which is still up for grabs. And there's still a lot of LGBTQ films being shown at the festival. And on September 5th, please join us at the award ceremony and we'll know who won the award. So these films, the student shorts competition are competing for the best student short award. And let's hear on September 5th, who won the award. So thank you all for joining in this Q&A. Really appreciate this.